I would say that the most profound experiences of my life were the most challenging ones. I always look back and I'm like, these are the best things that ever happened to me. Having chronic illness when I was 13, having near-death experiences and different challenges in my life and breakups and businesses falling apart. All of that, when I look back, I'm like, wow, this is the best thing that could ever happen, right? And if you're not seeing it that way, I just want to assert probably not enough time has passed or not enough integration has happened.
Jakob, you have this incredible story that you started telling me over the phone, and I said, hold on, we need to capture this in a podcast episode. So can you share with us your story and why you've lived, quote, multiple lives in just a few years?
Yeah, by now I'm 29 and I've died and been reborn so many times, emotionally, spiritually, in some ways, like almost physically too. And I feel like I've had a lot of experiences and I've fit a lot of lifetimes into these short lives so far. Um, yeah, it started when I was 13. I had a spiritual awakening. I had a spiritual experience when my whole body was covered in eczema, like pretty extreme condition of a skin disease. My whole entire body, I would scratch myself until I was bleeding, developed insomnia and depression. And at some point, finding a book on my grandmother's shelf that was talking about hypnosis, and I started recording my own hypnosis tapes, got deep into meditation, non-duality, Hinduism, Buddhism, and eventually that opened up my world to so many other things. When I was 18, I left Slovenia, started traveling the world, and that led to periods of homelessness, near-death experiences, traveling to India, sitting in the ashrams with the yogis, traveling to the Amazon, and being in the jungle with the indigenous medicine keepers. And I feel like through these periods, I've really like embodied so many different identities, and every single identity was like a portal of like ripping apart everything that I thought I was and shedding different parts of what wasn't real for me. So it just became the rebirth of everything that I am right now, through a lot of shedding of old stories and losing old identities, from martial artist to a coach to a teacher to a facilitator. Yeah, my story has been very diverse in many ways, but also very colorful in others.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's so true and interesting how we always have to go through these really difficult experiences to grow the most. I've found that to be especially true. And whenever I hear someone's story, I feel like there's always that truth that resurfaces. So thank you for sharing that. And you've come to these really amazing insights and realizations that are really transformative and inspiring that we're going to dive into today. So I look forward to getting into these messages, but I thought that foundation of hearing your story would be really powerful before we dive in. Why was 2024 specifically both the hardest and most expansive year of your life, Jakob?
I love that question. 2024 really cracked me open like nothing else. I went through a major breakup in my life with somebody I felt really connected with. I realized that a part of that wasn't so much the other person, but it was my identity to being in a relationship as well. It was a form of love addiction, let's say. And at the same time, launching one of my online containers in January last year, and then going through the second round and second iteration of that program towards October, November, exactly at the same time as I was going through the separation. I've taken on some of the biggest one-on-one clients I've ever worked with. So some of the most high-performing individuals, like taking them deep into the depths of somatics. And I've also had the privilege of being mentored by one of the pioneers in somatics throughout the whole entire year. So this 83-year-old lady who's been there when somatics were being born about 50, 60 years ago, really holding me in all of these experiences as well. So somewhere between the grief and the shattering of like the heart and the uncertainty that that brought, and allowing myself to go really into the depths of that, because I feel like throughout my life up until that point I've really avoided feeling a lot, and I've avoided being with these challenging experiences on emotional level. And a lot of times it was much easier to coach others than to be in those experiences myself. So 2024 really brought that to me in my heart and like pushed me to the space where I was forced in a way to meet my edges in that, while at the same time noticing how I can hold for grief and the expansion at the same time. So my online container that I entered into a business partnership in January last year, really starting to grow and expand through the word of mouth and growing to be a multi six-figure container as well. And as that was happening, I was learning how to navigate the capacity to have both that expansion and feel the depths of grief at the same time. So really starting to step into my power as somebody who is really able to go into the depths of that while also holding that much space for other people. And it really came through a lot of different channels. And I would say being able to have such strong support was one of the best and most growing things for me. But yeah, at the same time, also seeing how the reflections that we have, for example, relationships and business, really call us forwards in a big way, especially as facilitators, right? Because we say that we can hold space for this and we want more of that. And then God or the universe basically meets us with that challenge so that we grow through the experiences and we get to meet our own edges based on what we're calling in. So if I say I want more expansion and I want more money and I want better relationships, it's almost like everything that is not right for that gets stripped away. And then we get pulled towards the challenges that create or even force that expansion in our character to happen.
So it sounds like even though it was a really difficult experience, you know that it was the exact experience you needed and you know that it changed you and helped you evolve in this way that you really never have before.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say that the most profound experiences of my life were the most challenging ones. I always look back and I'm like, these are the best things that ever happened to me. Having chronic illness when I was 13, having near-death experiences and different challenges in my life and breakups and businesses falling apart, all of that, when I look back, I'm like, wow, this is the best thing that could ever happen, right? And if you're not seeing it that way, I just want to assert probably not enough time has passed or not enough integration has happened.
Yeah. And the tricky thing about that, though, is it's always in retrospect, right? It's always looking back and being like, oh, yeah, that needed to happen, even though it felt really shitty in the moment. But it's really important to reflect and remind ourselves that those difficult times are there for a reason. They are there to guide you, and that we wouldn't be the people we are today if it weren't for those particularly hard experiences. And I know everyone listening too can think of those really challenging experiences that they know deep down probably, molded them into who they are today. And it can help also offer perspective when you are in the middle of that experience. If something is feeling challenging in your life, to take a step back and remind yourself, this is molding me in a really important way, even though it might feel difficult in the moment. So thank you for sharing that beautiful message. And then you brought up this idea of the next thing I want to dive into, which I'm so glad about. Time doesn't heal. What you do with time does. What does that mean?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I wrote this in a post or in a thread a couple of months ago. And what was really coming through in that time when I wrote that was just seeing that time is a neutral thing. And you can hold on to the same story in your body and in your psyche for 10 years and nothing's going to change. So it's not about the time that passes. Most people, when especially like moving through grief or moving through a traumatic event, most people are just saying like, just give it time, time heals. But it's not really the time that heals. It's like actually what you do with it, because that's why we see people still grieving a loss of a parent 20, 30, 40 years ago, or not being able to get out of the victim loops around certain things that happen in their lives, is because it's not about the actual time. It's like putting in the work to feel things all the way through, to allow yourself to be witness to what this experience is bringing up on the surface. And you were saying being able to see things in retrospect. It's a tool I give to my clients as well here that I feel like maybe your audience would really enjoy as well. Something that I do with my clients is when there's events that they do not see, how could this be a positive thing? What I do is I have them write that down on the top of the page and then leave an empty page. And then they set an alarm on their phone, or like a reminder on their phone 3 months from now and 6 months from now. When that reminder goes off, they return to that page and they write down what have they learned from that experience and what positive things came out of that experience. And it's starting to reprogram the mind over time. Of course, it's not something that happens instantly or in a couple of sessions or whatever, but throughout like months and months of this, we start programming our minds that we can be inside of an experience and still know that something positive will come out of it. So that was really another confirmation that I got last year, moving through stages of grief and loss, was seeing that, wow, this is the best thing that will ever happen to me. And I know that is really, really challenging in the moment and it hurts in the moment, but I know as I step further away and look at it from a larger perspective, I'm like, I know for a fact that this is shaping me, that this is carving me, that this is molding me into exactly who I'm meant to be. So now at this space, like reframing all of this in my mind in such a way, I always come back to that understanding. Even in the midst of something challenging happening, so much beauty will come out of it. This is going to be in service of not just myself, but in service of other people, in service of life, right? So from this perspective, if we don't allow ourselves to fully be with that experience, to fully feel it all the way through, it doesn't get processed. It just gets stuck somewhere in the back of our mind, in the back of our psyche, in our bodies. And then we carry that. We carry that for the rest of our life. And most people end up being really good over time with coping with it. So all that time gives is like more sophisticated strategies of coping and not really a lot of opportunity to process it. But you can take a short amount of time and you can just let yourself be so deeply, so fully in it, whatever it is, traumatic event or traumatic experience or something that is sad or form of loss or grief or anger, whatever that is. It's not the time that is going to heal you. It's like actually being able to be with that experience to its depth, to the very core, and then allowing it to be processed through. And then coming out on the other side can sometimes happen in minutes, days, or months or years, depends on how deeply we let ourselves be with it.
That's beautiful. I don't know if you've read it, but one of my favorite books is The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And good, he's nodding if you're not looking on video. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend. It's definitely spiritual, definitely deep, but it's changed how I see the world and how I view any feeling that arises in my body. And it came to mind when you were sharing that story because he shares this idea that whatever comes up, to let it pass through and to like stay open and let yourself feel it and let it pass through you rather than staying closed and keeping it within you. Because if that samskara or like scar in is another way to say it is not felt through you, it's gonna stay within you, and then that's gonna result in like a trigger or like a resentment or just a negative feeling towards someone or something because you're not allowing yourself to feel it. And it's just that came to mind when you were sharing that, because it is really important to let ourselves feel these things even though they might feel uncomfortable. Because is it more uncomfortable to feel it in this moment and then let it go and release it? Or is it worse to like hold on to it and keep it stuck within you for the rest of your life? You know, I would very much choose the route of letting myself feel that discomfort and letting it pass through and like going deeper and seeing like the truth of it and then releasing it rather than letting that feeling or negativity control me or just like linger throughout the rest of my life because I chose to not feel it when it came up.
Yeah, exactly. And this is also the essence of a lot of somatic work, right? Is noticing what's happening in the body, paying attention to the sensations in the body, because they're always telling us a story. It's like a portal that takes us somewhere where something hasn't been fully felt or processed all the way through. That's why sometimes I'm in a session with people, and in the middle of the session, we just go into like the sensations in the body, and suddenly something opens up from childhood, from when they were 3 to 5 years old. And it's because it's been stored in the body for so long. It was just silently knocking. And sometimes these knocks are
Yeah.
so silent and then they just become louder and louder and louder. And I perceive triggers also to just be something that is really inviting us for something to be seen. Push notifications on the phone. Every time you get triggered by something, it's like an invitation of something that hasn't been fully felt all the way through. So it just gives you the opportunity to go back and revisit that.
I love that. Okay, next one. Growth isn't just about what you gain, it's about what you outgrow. Can you share a little bit more about this?
Yeah, I've had to leave a lot of things behind, people, projects, places. There's grief in growth that nobody talks about, and elevation requires separation. And in ontological coaching, we say that your life is created from who you are being. So at the core of everything is your being. So your environment is reflecting who you are being at all times. But when you change who you're being, your environment ultimately fights you for a moment before it catches up with you, right? So let's say that we go through a growth period, a growth spur internally through periods of like internal, inner personal development, work and growth. And we've built our environment to match our old self. So the first stage of that is really shedding everything that isn't in alignment with who we want to be. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not necessarily a negative thing. It's also not necessarily meaning that a person is at a lower vibration, or I find this new agey kind of terminology to be very bypassy of the situation. It's just different moments and different alignments, right? So I'm noticing in my life right now as well, what do I choose to surround myself with? Who are the 5 people that I know I'm surrounded with that I'm the most influenced by? Making sure that as I elevate, as I grow in different areas of my life, that my environment matches that as well. So it's less about creating new practices or adding new things on my plate or adding more people in my circle. It's more so about like allowing whatever is not right to fall away. And that's the devotion to truth, right? And there's like faith in it as well, which is when your nervous system starts expanding, it's the container that once felt safe might start to feel suffocating. So a lot of things might have to fall away in the process of that, including parts of the identity, the behaviors, the old ways of being, people, places, jobs, relationships, whatever that is.
Yeah, it's so real. And I love that you shared that it is a part of the growing process that really isn't talked about a ton, but it's a really difficult part of it, right? Like the people we used to be close to, the job we thought was for us, the relationship that we want that once was a big part of our identity. Often when we grow, these things are no longer right for us and fitting for us. And that's a continual part of the process. And it's really difficult, right? Because it can feel really hurtful. There can be a lot of grief there. But I think we all know deep down, like it is meant to be that way and this is what's meant to happen. But how have you kind of like handled that grief of leaving things behind that you thought were really for you? Like, what do you remind yourself of in that moment?
I keep coming back to what is meant for you will always find you. That's been a mantra that I've adopted throughout the last year or so. If it's meant for you, it will always find you. It will always find its way back. And even in terms of relationships, it takes 2 to be committed to it. If you're constantly the one who's repairing and chasing and trying to make it work, you're gonna spend the rest of your life in, struggle of like trying to hold something together. It requires the other
Yeah.
person to be on board and be on your team as well. And in the same way, I think the universe works in terms of like not just relationships, but also like jobs, projects, businesses, partnerships, friendships. It requires both to be there. So whatever is meant for you will always find you. That's been like the biggest mantra in that. But then it's also been allowing myself to be in the space of grief, like really grieve the parts of me that I've had to let go of. And with those parts of me, also the connections that were there to different people, to different places. And I believe the process is something I've been really preparing for throughout 10 years of being nomadic since I was 18, really moving places. And each place that I've moved was a new identity, it was a new way of being, it was new connections. And it was at the time where I wasn't really using much of the social media or online spaces. So everything was in person, right? And I've noticed like every single part, every single move, every single change really had an element of like, oh, I get to grieve a part of me now, a part of who I used to be, but also all the connections that I've built in the way to support that identity.
Yeah, yeah, that's so beautiful. Something that I try to bring to mind too is that it's not personal when you distance from someone or drift from someone or when they're no longer a big part of your life. It's not personal, it's a part of the process. Like it just might no longer be a good fit. But I think what makes it extra difficult sometimes is taking that personally, right? Whether someone drifts away from you or whether it just feels like a loss, like it's not something you did wrong or something necessarily even about you. It's just like the fact is you're growing and they're growing and it's just no longer right. And so that's something that always really helps me, because I think one thing that I get stuck on sometimes is like, oh, what did I do, to that person? Or like, oh, why did that relationship not work? And it's easy to get in your head about it, but it's really not personal. It's just understanding like what's right and what's not.
Yeah, and this is where we get to start separating the stories from the facts. So what is actually happening versus the meaning that we're creating about it. And I love that you brought that up. And we find it quite natural in the Western cultures, at least, to periods of our time with different romantic partners. So we've got a few years with this person, and then a few years with that person, and then a few years with that person. But for some reason, we get very attached to our friendships. So we're like, okay, this is my
Mm,
friend since I was in a third grade. Like, I need to stay with them. I cannot, like, end this, even when we're seeing it's very misaligned, right? So that's something that has been like very interesting to observe in both myself and in my clients as well, which is, what is that attachment to that as well? What am I afraid that I'm going to lose if I see that we're just not on the same path right now? And that doesn't necessarily mean like never talking again. It just means like maybe it's time to take a little break and not communicate every day or every other day or every week or whatever for a period of time. And a lot of times, just by who you're being, a lot of people follow that. If it's your way of being is inspiring, right? Preach the gospel at all times and sometimes use words when necessary. I find that just like the way of being can call people forwards, especially when we distance ourselves. So it's like, I choose to not be in full on interaction right now with you because I'm focusing on these parts of myself. And that can actually be the awakening that the other person is needing, because it's no longer enabling their behaviors, but is actually calling them forwards of like, wow, okay, this is the level of a boundary that, not a lot of people can embody. But yeah, within that, it's
yeah.
not taking it personally, not making meanings about it of like, I am wrong, this is wrong. There's inherently nothing that's wrong with any way of being. It's just the meanings that we attach to it. So it's having grace with oneself too, of like, oh, this is where I'm going and this is where the other person is going. We do that in relationships
Yeah.
too. When somebody wants to have kids and somebody doesn't, and it's like not necessarily that one is better than the other, but it's just like we see it's not aligned, right? Or like one person
Yeah.
wants to live here and one wants to live here. But in friendships, we tend to kind of make this all taboo and run away from this topic.
It's really true. And I wonder if it's because a friendship can last a lifetime, but when you think of a relationship, it's only one very special relationship for most people that does last that lifetime. So it's more normal to like evolve in and out of maybe romantic partners. But with friendships, like there's no limit of the amount of friends we can have. So maybe it's like we attach extra hurt and meaning when we do distance from those friends and when we do lose those friends. So that's really interesting you bring that up, because I 100% feel that. I almost feel like it's more hurtful when I have a friendship breakup versus like an actual breakup, because I'm like, oh, that's just a part of it. But a friendship breakup feels like, I don't know, you're just right. It's such a bigger deal. And I know people listening probably feel that way too.
Yeah, it's because it's a type of a trauma I call a narrative trauma, and it creates this existential depression when we start identifying ourselves with something. And then when that gets lost, it's like, oh, who am I?
Yeah. Attaching that identity and attaching that meaning. It's so powerful.
Yeah.
We can't outthink old patterns. What should we do instead?
I see a lot of people trying to go the talk therapy route. I'm not here to say anything is wrong or anything is less than, but I've seen people who have been in talk therapy for 20 plus years do a couple of somatic sessions and say like, this was more impactful than that. And what I have seen in myself and in a lot of other people that I've worked with at this point, hundreds of clients, is that when we go through the wisdom of the body, we bypass the prefrontal cortex and the thinking mind, because the mind is very clever and it finds ways to hold on to different things and not really go to the depths of it. But what we're actually finding in the body is often like the truth. When we
Mm,
follow the signals in the body, that's often when it opens the portal to old experiences that maybe haven't been fully met yet. What I find is, instead of talking our way out of a pattern or trying to outthink a way out of a pattern, is we look at the nervous system and we look at the body. So where do I not feel safe? What are different parts of me like wanting to protect me from? I believe that every behavior has a positive intent. So looking at like what's the intent of this behavior and where is this stuck in my body? So is there a memory that is holding on to that narrative, like really fixing that narrative in my body? And that goes so far beyond the mind, beyond the thinking. And I would say we can outthink our way out of certain patterns. The majority of them are actually stuck in the nervous system, in the mind-body matrix. And what we to do in that process is look at where is it stuck and why is it stuck there, and then going to the root of that and processing that at the root, which means that how do we create the completion that we were never able to have in the moments where, for example, a traumatic imprint happened. How do we discharge that energy from the body? So let's say the pattern of anger. If we try to outthink out of our way out of constantly feeling frustrated and upset with our partner, it's going to be very challenging. We can analyze it and break it down as much as we can, and this is happening because of this and because of that. But oftentimes it just needs like really healthy discharge of energy so that we see what's behind this anger. In the same way, like the narratives of the mind around like the sadness and grief and loss, we can get so caught up in our mind trying to untangle it, where all the body wants is to discharge that energy through crying. Of people not allowing themselves to cry because of the beliefs that are there. And again, just like coming back to the body, following the pathway of the body, listening to what it's trying to tell us, and then allowing that discharge to happen through that process.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. It brings back to mind that idea of attaching too much meaning and trying to like logic or think your way through something when really what you need is just to let yourself feel, to let that feeling come up and arise.
Yeah.
And I think that's so beautiful and powerful.
Yeah.
Clarity doesn't come before you act, it comes after. Tell us about that.
Yeah. I've never really had clarity before the leap. I tried. I really tried. I tried to think exactly who my niche is going to be and which avatar I'm serving before I launched my business. And it just kept me stuck. And I noticed that when I started coaching high performers and like people who are entrepreneurs, there's a thread between the ones who are successful and the ones who are not. The ones who actually make their way to some form of success. I'm speaking here purely financially, is that they act. Like they actually create, they make the first steps and then the path appears. The more path appears, and then they take a couple more steps and more path appears. And the ones who kind of get stuck in the process of like overthinking and perfectionism are the ones who are really trying to make sure that everything is perfect and they feel very clear. So that's what I mean when I say clarity doesn't happen before you act. Clarity comes 10 seconds after taking action, as an example. And really in that space, for me in my personal journey, I've noticed that the things that actually worked were having the idea, acting out on the idea, and then watching the path appear as a byproduct of the action. Because you learn by living, right? You can't learn how to drive a parked car. So if you're waiting to feel ready, you'll always be waiting. And that's just the fact of it. So start messy and let the clarity come like mid-stride is something that I would really encourage everyone to do.
Yeah, 100%. What came to mind is think about going on a walk or going for a workout, like moving your body. That movement always helps you feel more unstuck, right? It always helps bring about this clarity and these ideas and sparks creativity. And it's the same, I think, with taking any action and taking any step. Like you will learn through that experience and the clarity will come in taking action. It was like when I started the podcast, like I didn't know all the answers. I didn't really know my niche or community. I didn't really know what the hell I was doing. I just kind of like had to take one step at a time, but I still acted despite that. And I've gotten so much clarity and knowledge as I went. And I think it's really applicable to every single part of our lives. And that's really awesome that you got to learn that from all these successful entrepreneurs and that you see that recurring pattern, because I think it's a really powerful and true one for sure.
Yeah, and what I see also in that within myself is my first few coaching clients. When I was in the retreat business, I would run retreats, plant medicine retreats for a series of a couple of years and run ceremonies and lead events. And people started coming to me and they were like, do you do one-on-one sessions? And I just kept on saying no. And I said no and no and no, up until at some point it was like this deep curiosity. And my partner at the time was training how to be a coach. And I asked her, what does coaching even mean? What is that? And she explained it to me, and I was like, oh, that seems pretty easy. And she was like, yeah, you'd be a great coach. And I remember there was like so many things that came up for me around like, oh, but I need to be certified in this, I need to be certified in that, all of these things that need to happen. And how do I move forward? How do I do this? How do I do that? And instead, I just said yes to the calling when it appeared. By saying yes and taking that leap and taking that first action, it opened up a lot more. And only once I was actually with people, I was realizing the things that I don't yet know. And because of that, there's so many opportunities that opened up. Like, for example, even being mentored by one of the pioneers in somatics, training with some world-renowned coaches and like being in their circles through their certification programs, being able to like work with them, facilitate with them, learn from them. All of that got created because I said yes to the calling when it appeared. But I see so many people stuck in the way of like, I need to know all the steps before I take that first action on it. And that's where something, if I could like rewrite something in the space of entrepreneurship, I would say just take massy action. Just keep taking massy action.
100%. Because the reality is, too, there is no perfect action, right? There's always going to be imperfections, and there's always going to be things that you're like, could have done that a little bit better. But it's so much better to take imperfect action than no action at all. And that leads me to this last point that I actually would love to end on, this idea that overthinking is underfeeling. I feel like that really ties together this whole narrative of what we've talked about. But why is this important to you?
Yeah, overthinking is self-protection disguised as strategy, I'd say. Overthinking is really being in the space where we don't allow ourselves to be with the things that are maybe a bit more challenging to be with. So what I see quite often is, for example, through the spaces of like grief, a lot of people tend to escape and justify and overanalyze. Oh, I'm feeling this way because of this, and everything is going to be okay. Let me find mental evidence for it. Where again, like coming to the previous points that we've made, sometimes the only way to get to the other side is going all the way through it. And not allowing ourselves to be with the feeling sense, with the felt sense, where we escape when it's not safe to be in the body is our mind, especially with people who have been through traumatic experiences or being told not to feel or being punished or abused or hurt in one way or the other. When body becomes unsafe, we tend to escape to the mind. And the more we live in our mind, the more we become sophisticated about our neurosis. The more we become really smart and clever about how we're avoiding doing the actual work. When I see people really in the spaces where they overthink everything, all the ways that they're showing up, their purpose, their posts, their relationships, their traumatic imprints, even like the talk therapy, right? Going so much in the mind, just really avoiding being with the actual experience because maybe that just hasn't been safe at some point. So what we do here is like we really get to create the safety in the body first. We need to create the safety in the nervous system, in the body, for us to be with the experiences that have been there. And the mind can be really good for that, but it can also be a really, really big enemy, especially if we're used to and prone to just over analyzing everything. So when you act before you feel ready and you speak before everything is perfect, you're starting to trust the truth that is more real and integrous than some things that you polish in your mind. And even overthinking about every single answer to every question. And I see that a lot as well. It's like some people just plot what they're going to say to more appear a certain way instead of just being in full presence with another person. So the more we can get out of the head and into the body, I find that there's more truth that is really deeper connection with ourselves, with higher power and deeper presence with other people that can get created there.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Selfishly, I wanted to end with that because I used to be such an overthinker, and I need to re listen to that and really reflect on that. And I know you really just hit home for a lot of other people too. But Jakob, you're so amazing. Thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.